welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. This is part 4 of my Inktober week 2 drawing for the formal zombie portrait, and this will also be the last part. And in this video we're going to do the final inking. If you want to follow along with traditional materials, check out part 1 in this series where I have a list of some of the inks and the materials that you can use for a traditional Inktober. So what I want to do is start out by darkening the background, and I decided I wanted sort of a gray color or a bluish gray color here. And so I'm using the Marin brush, and then I'm going to switch to the spray brushes for the blending part and just kind of blend out sort of I just want kind of a blue wash background. And usually when I'm doing this, I would do this background first, but I wasn't sure what I wanted it to look like. I mean, what it would look like with the bright blue colors and the red colors, so I just kind of did a neutral wash for the first background wash. And then I went ahead and decided that dark blue would probably, or sort of a lighter blue anyway, but a bluish gray would probably look better. And so you can also do this traditionally. Just go ahead and paint around the little curly cues like I'm doing here. And you can go ahead and just make sure that you sort of use a lot of water if you're doing this traditionally, and that just sort of smooths it out there. And that's kind of what I'm doing here, is just smoothing it out with the airbrush and the watercolor brush, and just painting around the curly cues. And it doesn't matter if there's some strokes left, because we kind of want a little bit of roughness there, just to look like the background. Maybe it's a wallpaper that this portrait is hanging on or something like that, or just a painted wall. But it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth, and in fact it gives the picture more interest if you kind of leave a little bit of some variations in the paint color for the background. And so I thought that looked a lot better. So then I went ahead and started on the final inking. And in Infinite Painter I used the Chanel brush. It just gives me kind of the uniform look that I want for this portrait anyway. You can use some of the other brushes if you want them to look more like a dip pen. But if you're following along traditionally, I like to use Micron Pigma type pens. And so here I'm adding a little bit of red ink to the zombie's flesh there on the face, just to give it more of an impact and sort of brighten it up. And you can use whatever brand of ink that you want, but make sure that you do this. If it's not waterproof ink and you're doing this traditionally, then go ahead and do this as your final step so that the ink won't run. And then here I'm just kind of working a little bit more on the rot and decay on the face and sort of on the teeth, just refining those a little bit and going over them and going over the beard a little bit, and also the lines on his face, just trying to make it look sort of decayed and mortified. And then I'm also working on the shirt here, his tie, and I'm using black ink for that. And I kind of like to use different colors of ink just depending on what the color is in the picture, but black ink really makes an impact. So if you want to use black ink, that will make things stand out. Now I did want to add a little bit of some brown to the beard, just a little bit in there, just for a little bit of color. So you can use a walnut or whatever sort of ink that you have. And you might want to use an acrylic ink if none of these other inks are standing out. And then I'm using black again for the hat because The hat was black, so we want to use a black ink for it, and just refining the hat band and making sure that the strokes that you put on the hat are sort of rounded, so that gives it the circular or cylinder look that his hat shape is, and it gives it a three-dimensional look. And so I just wanted to step back and see how that looked. And so I zoom it in when I'm using Infinite Painter, and I'm working a little bit, or zoom out. You zoom out like when you want to step back from your painting and you're using digital, you zoom out. And then you zoom back in when you want to see details, which is what I'm doing. And I'm just working kind of on the clothes a little bit. And then the frame is really ornate. So I wanted to go ahead and use sort of a brown ink on it, probably a walnut color if you're following along with traditional materials. And I wanted to kind of thicken the lines a little bit and add sort of the shadows to it and make it look like an antique gold. And then here I'm just adding the little scribbles that are probably like little leaves around the edge of the portrait frame there in the oval, and just kind of making little scribbles there just to give it sort of a hint of a fancy ornate look. And working on the oval, just darkening it a little bit more, trying to get it kind of to look a little bit more refined. And that's what you're doing for this frame, is you just want to get it a little bit more refined looking and cover over the pencil strokes. A lot of people will erase their pencil strokes if they're following along traditionally, or digitally they'll make them real light or light blue or something. But I don't mind if they stay in the original picture. I think it kind of adds to the picture myself, but a lot of people don't like it. And I guess if you're doing cartooning and you're doing it professionally, of course, you'll have to erase those lines. But I kind of like the sketchy look just to give it some interest to the picture. And so that's kind of what I'm doing here, is just working over the pencil lines and adding a little bit more detail to the curly cues on the edge of the frame, darkening those a little bit, and adding some lines to the leaves just to make them look a little bit more fancy looking, and just kind of adding a little bit of texture to them also to kind of give it a three-dimensional look, as well as the shadow part that this darker ink will give. But I also want to give a little bit more detail, like there's some etchings on the frame, and it's probably like an old brass frame or something, so you would kind of give it a little bit of an etched look, and that just sort of adds detail to the frame and makes it look more ornate. And so that's what I'm trying to do here, and just kind of smoothing out the oval shape here and working on the mask and trying to get it a little bit darkened around the edges just to give it the metallic look as well. And you just keep doing that to sort of add the shadows to the frame here. And after a while, your hand's going to get sore because you're really adding a lot of detail here, and my hand started to hurt. But you can stop for a little while and let your hand rest a little bit and then go back to it, which is what I had to do, because this kind of adding little bitty details, after a while it really does start to kill your hand, or at least for me. Some people might get used to it, but I do have to stop and rest my hand a little. But here I'm going ahead and adding more details to the leaves and just working on the curly cues, putting in that etched look on the edge there and darkening it a little bit towards the edge of the frame just to give it more interest there and more shadow. And of course I want to go ahead and ink the skull, and I just went ahead and used the brown ink because I want it to look like it's part of the frame, not not separate from it or anything like that. And then I went ahead and signed it, but I still wasn't quite finished as usual. I always find one or two things to work on after I sign it. And here I decided I wanted a little bit of some white ink. If you're following along traditionally, this would be jelly roll pens or acrylic ink. And just put it around the frame of his glasses just to kind of make the glasses show up a little bit. Make it a broken line so that it looks like there's light sort of shining off of it. And you can use a really light yellow or just a white ink pen or white acrylic pen. And then here I'm just looking at it and seeing if I wanted to do anything else, and I decided that it was good. So this is the end of my videos for Inktober week 2. And it's also the final video for my zombie portrait. And stay tuned for Inktober week 3, where I have a totally new picture. And if you're interested in finding out what that is, just hit the subscribe button. And thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below, and I will catch you later.